Hi, this is Roopak, and you're listening to Flux Navigators. I'm a producer and media entrepreneur and founder of Mumbai LA production company Bang Bang. I'm also a diplobrat, or the kid of a diplomat, and that's one of the main reasons I've had the unique opportunity to live in 13 cities in 10 countries on 6 continents. It's a major part of my identity, you could say. So I've grown up with the deep-seated belief that the world is a very small place, and I have the strong desire to make everyone else internalize that too. It's also the reason I'm somewhat of a chameleon when it comes to my English. My accent unconsciously switches depending on whom I'm talking to. Sometimes that freaks people out, but that's how it's always been since I was a little kid. But enough about me, let's move on to the show. Since that fateful day at CES 2016 when Netflix announced it was going live in 130 new countries in one shot, we've been living in a new content paradigm, one where audiences around the world are watching content created around the world, en masse. It's what I like to call the decentralization of Hollywood. Join me on Flux Navigators as I shoot the shit with creators, writers, showrunners, producers, directors, investors, media executives, and other key voices shaping this new global reality. Welcome to Flux Navigators. What's up, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Flux Navigators. I have with me Johnny Galvin and Daniel Turcan, who are co-founders of the Vespucci Group, which, according to VespucciGroup.com, is a film, TV, podcast, and multimedia incubator that produces fact-based stories from around the world via a consortium of leading journalists. We'll talk a lot more about that as we go forward with the podcast, but first of all, welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
May I just say, Roopak, that intro, you could voice commercials for Sunny D if you wanted, because that was such incredible voiceover work for that intro.
So energetic. It was energetic. Yeah. It was optimistic. It was inspiring.
I would buy anything that you're schlepping with that voice. So I'm not sure if you're reading the ads or you have ads yet on this podcast, but if so, just let me know and I'll buy whatever you're selling.
Whoever your voiceover agent is, please do connect us with that person.
Thank you, guys. It's funny because I occasionally do get asked to do voiceovers, but it's only by people working at our company, and no one's ever paid me for it, although I would love for that to happen at some point. Yeah. So where are you guys right now?
Daniel?
I am in our offices, which are in Brooklyn, New York, and I am overlooking the East River, and it's a sunny day.
Nice. And Johnny?
Normally, I'm in Los Angeles, where the other half of the company is based, but I'm actually in Colorado at the moment, on the side of a snow-capped mountain.
As you can be right now. And how long have you been there?
For about 2 weeks. And then I'll be heading back to LA this week. So, yeah.
Nice. And, we'll talk more about that when we get into talking about how the company functions. But I want to start with the question that I ask all my podcast guests, all 275 of them, although this is one of the first few episodes, so I'm kidding, of course. And the question is, what are you guys obsessing over? Daniel, what are you obsessing over right now?
Well, from a professional standpoint, I am obsessing over how to build our audio network and our audio capabilities, just as you have. So audio is a big focus for me. I'll speak for myself. And then from a personal level, well, should I say from a personal standpoint?
Yeah, please.
Is that interesting?
Of course.
I think probably I've been very excited. I've been talking about this for a little bit, but I'm very excited about getting a rowing machine and so I'm obsessing over which rowing machine to buy. I've been looking at rowing machines and reading reviews for the last 2 weeks.
So when are you going to press the button?
It's a good question. There's a strong chance that it might happen during this podcast as we're recording, because I'm eyeing one. I think I've picked it, or never. or never. I'm on the fence between.
Well, I think, Daniel, I mean, you mentioned our offices are near a river. Have you thought about why a machine? Why not hop in a boat and start up and down the Hudson?
I agree with Johnny. I think that's a better idea.
Okay.
Keep going.
I'll consider it. Thank you.
Johnny, what are you obsessing over?
Definitely audio, as Daniel mentioned. It has become an obsession of ours really over the past year, and I'm sure we'll dive more into it. And then it's interesting because I the work not work balance is completely blurred right now, and especially when late at night I'm sort of on deep. I love going on deep dark corners of Spotify and trying to find kind of obscure songs. It's a way of sort of digitally crate digging, if you will, and trying to find artists that I like and see if they have playlists, or see who the algorithm recommends, and try go deep on a wormhole. And there's a website which I'm equally obsessed with called whosampled.com, which I've recently found myself on spending a lot of time on.
Oh, wow.
And basically, have you been on it, Roopak?
No, I haven't. But, I was going to say I can't wait for this to get over, but that would be very rude. I'm really enjoying the beginning of our conversation, but I'm going to get to it as soon as we're done with this recording.
Sure. Yeah. Get on it. It's a wormhole that you'll love.
Oh, I love it. Nice. So, guys, I've been particularly fascinated with Vespucci's business model, and obviously, you guys have. I just read out something from your site, and you have your spiel that you give people. And believe me, I have my own spiel about Vespucci because I've told so many people about it. I'd really love for our audience to feel that same sense of amazement and wonder that I felt when I first met you, Johnny, along with Bridie, who's your head of development at Shutters in Santa Monica back in October 2019. We were put in touch, connected by our common friend Raghav, who is also on your board. And I knew a little bit about it from the site. And then when you told me all about it, the penny dropped, and I was like, wow, this is such an amazing idea. And before we get into it, I just want to tell you, Vespucci's been on my mind because, especially not just because of the company, but my younger son, Kai, who is 9 years old, is studying explorers. And so, so Vespucci has been thrown about at home for the past week multiple times. Over to you. What is Vespucci about?
Yeah, so we really are a company that is based off of the concept that journalists are the hardest working and have the best ideas out there as storytellers. And we've built this company, we've built a network of several hundred journalists from around the world. And we raised the fund to fund their investigations and look at ways to turn stories that journalists come up with into a variety of mediums, audiovisual mediums. So that's podcast, film, it can be documentary, can be scripted, can be television. We also work with journalists on print articles as well as audio articles. So a variety of mediums, but it really comes down to finding a great story. And that's all around the world. So hence the name Vespucci, and your son is studying explorers. For us, it's that spirit of exploration is what drives the company.
That's fascinating. And just to get a little bit sort of more detail about it, you mentioned that you fund their investigations. So I'm just wondering how that actually works. Do you say, okay, here's, X $1,000 for you to kind of do this for the next 1 year? Or do they apply for a grant, or is this an existing network, or is it a sort of malleable and flexible network that has people coming in into it and leaving every now and then? How does that work?
Sure. Well, the network itself is one that is very fluid and really just sort of project by project based with each journalist. And sort of the economics of each kind of relationship does differ kind of project to project. We do have a sort of boilerplate way of working, but normally it is a journalist will pitch us an idea at a very early seed stage. And we will kind of together with them kind of work out a roadmap of what the life of that story might be. So if we eventually perhaps see it as a scripted TV series, we will then sort of work with them, create a budget, fund their work, and then also kind of work side by side to figure out a roadmap to get to that eventual place. And that might be first creating an article that we tell in audio format, that then will be sent out to executives to be told as hopefully eventually a TV series. It really is case by case. But and I'll add that there's other times that we actually can come up with an idea for an area or a subject, and in fact sort of pitch it to the journalists, and the journalists go away and do research and come up with some interesting insight into a story or an angle that we haven't seen before. And then we go and create the intellectual property that will then base a further adaptation off of, if that makes sense. So it's really a two-way street.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Okay, we'll come back more, and we'll come back to talk more about the specifics of what you guys are doing and maybe some of the projects that you're talking about. But I'm kind of interested in the fact that you guys are two co-founders, one in New York, one in LA, and you've got your team spread out, and then there's also the added complexity, or I would say even benefit from some angles of functioning in the post-pandemic era. So how do you guys make it all happen? And let's start with, how did you guys meet, or how do you know each other, and where did you come up with the idea of doing this together?
Daniel, take it away.
We met in, I think it was 2010, and it was the NBA Finals, the Lakers versus the Celtics. And I had actually just landed in LA, and I was about to move to Los Angeles from New York. And our friend that we have in common picked me up from the airport, and we went straight to a bar to see the game. And Johnny showed up, and Johnny and I met at that bar during that game, and we hit it off. It was special, and we were friends for a while. First, we actually did work together in a completely different capacity, but we did work together early on a film, on a documentary about Suge Knight, which was done for Showtime. And at the time, Johnny was, I believe, an assistant for the producer on that film, and I was camera operator C or D or whatever letter. And so we also had that fun experience of spending some quality time with Suge Knight in Vegas for a little while.
Wow.
And then from then on, we both kind of had our own respective and very different careers within the film industry. And Johnny had been working with sort of more established Hollywood entities and big directors and big producers and so on, and working on big blockbuster type films, while I had more experience in working in independent cinema. And I fast forward, I can't remember exactly when, but I felt like I was ready and able to start doing something on my without another entity, and I wanted to start something new. And I pitched that idea to Johnny over a lunch. So this was maybe 2016 or something, and it started with just one project, and that project was based on journalistic work from two journalists in Italy. And so I talked to Johnny about that idea of working on just this one project and trying to develop it together. And I guess he was at a similar place where he felt that he also would had the desire and perhaps the ability, whether that was founded or not, to go ahead and do things without a bigger structure. And that was the first project. And out of that project grew a desire to work together on a more systemic level, and then trying to find a company and a goal for us, and something that would be exciting but also challenging and a bit different. and out of that came Vespucci.
Right. I love how you said Vespucci in the end. Would it be fair to say that what is Vespucci today was an evolution of an idea, or was it something that was, brainchild that you guys had, and that was the original idea? Because it seems to me like you almost couldn't do this 10 years ago. I mean, you definitely couldn't do this 10 years ago. You almost couldn't even do this 5 or 6 years ago. It makes so much sense though in today's context. So was today's version the evolution of what the original idea was?
Well, yes and no. Ironically, if I go back to the original days, the early days of when we were discussing the company and the concept, it was very close and is very close to what we have now. I think are the fundamentals, what we sort of gravitated towards and around when we started conceiving the company was two things. It was a passion for stories that were true, a belief that journalists are underrepresented overall, especially in the film and TV community in the U.S., and that we had a tremendous sort of respect for the amount of dedication and time they could spend on a story, and so that they would be incredible allies. That was one. And then the other thing was a belief that mediums, platforms, everything is in flux, that the media landscape is in flux, that we had no idea what was happening, what was going on, and really in a way nobody really does, and that we, instead of thinking of a specific medium and so becoming a podcast production company or solely becoming a film production company or a documentary or so on, we thought of ourselves more as a story company, and that we would be able, by focusing on story, we would be able to pivot. However, one, the story demanded, and two, the market took shape. So in many ways, that was our core belief when we started the company, and now, X amount of years later, it still very much is what we focus and what is our North Star, which is journalists and being able to pivot into whatever medium and whatever the market is expecting or wanting.
Right. Okay, that's cool. And then when was it that you guys, because you raised some money and you have financial backing that allows you to do what you're doing, when did that happen and how did that happen?
That was in 2019 in January is when we closed the financing. But really, the 2018, a majority of 2018 was spent flirting with potential partners and us really putting together a pitch and knocking on some doors to see who would be willing to back us. And we eventually landed on this family office called Dorfman Media Holdings, which is run by Charlie Dorfman. And they have a sort of a myriad of investments in entertainment and media. But we are sort of a very niche investment in their portfolio, but one that's been we think pretty strong. And we're currently making a film together right now, which is very exciting.
Oh wow, very cool. So I'm curious how do Johnny and Daniel divvy up the responsibilities? Who does what?
It's a mess. It's a mess. I mean, if
Daniel,
we could
if you'd like to answer that question.
Yeah. If we could figure this out during this podcast, it'd be incredible.
Yeah.
I think if we brought in some type of coach or something like that, or consultant, they would be appalled by how we do things. At least Johnny and I, how we divvy up things, and hopefully able to structure us. But so far, it's really, there is no clear rules per se or fields for each of us to focus on. I would say two things. One is obviously, and let's talk pre-pandemic times. Johnny is in Los Angeles, and that means a set of types of meetings and conversations and socializing, et cetera, that leads him to have these types of relationships or build certain rapport with production companies, for example, while I'm in New York. So already there's a geographical kind of divide that naturally will give us sort of each of us a set of responsibilities. The other thing that happens is that which is quite good and I think healthy, but organically, each of us will kind of take on projects,
Right.
and it rarely is. I don't think it's ever been dictated. Johnny take this and Daniel take that. It's more probably a question of, again, one, the relationship that we have with the production company or the journalist. And so maybe I will have met the journalist in person a couple of times in New York over a beer, and the journalist pitched me the story. And so obviously I feel closer to it, or I have a rapport to it, or just kind of a natural inclination that the story just speaks to one of us. And so we'll kind of take a little bit the lead. Of course, we have an incredible team that supports that, but just to say that that's probably one way that we divide, is just kind of, and it's somewhat natural, which is just to say our inclination for certain stories, and then each of us will take the lead on it.
Nice. It's great that, things flow naturally, because that does speak volumes of the fact that, you guys are really synergistic in the way that you work. I noticed in the time that I have known you guys, the team has expanded of late as well. And so that obviously means that you guys are busy. And we've been talking about stuff, about possible ways to work together. There was a project that we were discussing, and it didn't work out for other reasons, which were kind of good reasons in a way for you guys. And we talked about that. And I know that we are looking for a way for Bang Bang and Vespucci to work together very soon. And that's obviously a conversation that we will revisit in a few months' time. But I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, the projects that are keeping you guys busy, and what are you most excited to talk about?
Sure. Well, really, what's been keeping us busy over particularly this past 12 months, which kind of marks when the US went into lockdown, is really rethinking audio and its relationship to fact-based storytelling. Whilst we've been dabbling in podcasting, a year or two before the pandemic started, and we started creating sort of podcast series, we started to take the knowledge that we'd gained in making podcasts for Audible and Sony and Spotify, and thinking, how can we apply that to our journalistic storytelling in the way that let's rethink about partnering with publications to create long form print journalism, which we were doing before. We said, let's apply those skill sets to creating audio long form journalism. And so that's been a real focus of us for the past kind of year, is really heightening the ability for a journalist to pitch us an idea that doesn't quite fit into a podcast series, but it sings to us as a film, potential TV series, potential documentary, or something we don't quite know what it is yet, but we love the story, and it just grabs us in a way that we can't let go of. So we'll then commission the journalists, and we pair them with an audio producer, and we create these 30, 45, sometimes 90-minute audio articles, and we distribute them kind of online. And for us, that's what we've become excited and obsessed about, and we'll dig more into them. But it's really audio and the future of journalistic and nonfiction storytelling.
That's fascinating. And, I want to sort of dig a little bit deeper into that. Why, and, we've obviously, everyone knows that podcasting is exploding. Every second person, I'd say 100% of people on this podcast have something to do with podcasting. Well, That's a miracle. But
Hmm.
I would say that, it seems to be that everyone, every second person, as I said, seems to be doing a podcast. It's, especially in the past year, I would say that the inflection point was probably Joe Rogan's deal with Spotify when it became, that was, I would say, the second inflection point. The first one, I can't really put a finger on it, but it was a few years ago. The second one was Joe Rogan's deal, and now it's sort of mainstream in every way. But that's sort of, something that's, I guess, more from a general audience standpoint. How do you see audio in terms of why do you think this is happening right now, and what is so exciting about this space, in terms of, is it that these are all stepping stones to eventually becoming television content or film content, more sort of visual medium, or is audio standalone audio in itself as far as narrative goes?
So I think I'll be honest that we, like most film TV production companies out there, started podcasting with the intent and the idea that they would be a way to flip content for film and TV, and to really amplify the IP. In the meantime, while doing it, we obviously the economics have changed, the market has changed, but also sort of our honestly, it sounds a bit cheesy, but our love for the medium has kind of evolved, and we learned more about the medium, we learned more what we could do, and I think overall we've, thanks also to a team that we've built, we are able to create audio which is really exciting and challenging, and is moving us. So if we started the company and looking at podcasts as just a way to flip IP, I think we're now very much focused on and believe that podcast on its own, it just lives in that space, is completely adequate. And if we can create something that actually makes a buzz, gets an audience, that's an incredible feat. So we're excited and we're challenged by podcasting today more than we ever were.
Got it. Right. And are there particular projects, whether they are podcasts or anything else on film or television, that you want to talk about, which you're particularly excited about right now? Specific projects?
Yeah, there's two. Our sort of, our two first forays into podcasting was with this company called Blumhouse, the film and TV studio, and they actually funded our first ever foray into the medium with a fantastic journalist named Jennings Brown, who infiltrated himself into a quasi-religious sect in Northern California. Mm-hmm. And that will be released soon on a large platform in the US. We can't quite say who yet, but we're closing that deal, and that should be out probably spring, if not summer. And then we're following up with another Blumhouse podcast as well off the back of that. They're both incredibly spooky. And then as well in the UK, we're about to announce this, and we'll give you the worldwide exclusive, Roopak. But we're about to announce a Slate deal with Audible, and that is that they've greenlit 3 podcasts, 2 of which we're already in production on, as well as a slate of 10 to develop. And we've partnered with this company called Big Light Productions, which is run by Frank Spotnitz, who, interestingly, before he started his career as a screenwriter, which he became very successful writing X-Files and eventually show running shows like Man in the High Castle and Medici, he was a journalist for 7 years before he became a screenwriter. So we've sort of paired our skill sets, us being able to find stories and produce podcasts, and his undeniable and unrivaled affinity for storytelling, and we're applying him and his team, their ability to shape a story in a meaningful way to both our documentary and our fiction podcasts. So that's a very exciting venture that we'll be launching this year.
That's awesome. Congratulations, guys. Slate of 10 is huge. And I'm particularly fascinated by this because what that tells me is that you have, the same kind of deals in place going on in the podcasting universe and in audio only. Obviously, nothing is audio only necessarily. Anything can be extended to other medium. But in terms of the overall deals that production companies have with the big streamers or with networks, I guess it works in the same way. So just break it down for us a little bit in terms of understanding that, because I, for one, don't really know that much about it. And of course, you see occasional Deadline or Variety or Hollywood Reporter articles about deals like this being cracked. But can you give us a little bit more insight in terms of, and obviously I understand that, you may not be able to speak about the specifics of your deal, but in general, how does this space work, if you were to compare it to stuff that's happening for film and television slates?
I would say it's very similar, and it's becoming very similar. A lot of the models that were applied in traditional film and TV are seemingly, from our standpoint, are being applied in podcasting. Even, for example, having like credits like executive producers. I mean, executive producer on a podcast, someone who's execing a podcast, is a very specific role. But suddenly now, when you're doing podcasts with talent and so on, and they want EP credits, you're giving them EP credits on a podcast just like you are on film. We're really blurring the line there, and we're taking a lot of cues from the film and TV sort of business and lingo. But in terms of these types of structures, for the most part, they are similar. I mean, we have a deal where can't go too into detail, but it's specific to a territory and to a set of relationships that we have. So only certain projects fall into that bucket with Audible. But I mean, I think there's plenty of, as you noted, there's plenty of articles coming out almost daily, it seems now, of ex-celebrity coming up with a first look deal or an output deal with Spotify or Apple or so on. So again, I think a lot of it is quite similar to the film and TV world.
Right. And, one of the things that really fascinated me about Vespucci in the first place is actually something that is directly related to what this podcast is all about. And if I were to put a theme to this podcast, which I think I talk about in the intro as well, is that Flux Navigators is really highlighting the phenomenon that I call the decentralization of Hollywood. And I think that it seems to me that, Vespucci is very much in line with that same thinking. I mean, given that, Daniel, you're in New York, Johnny, you're in LA, you're from the UK, Daniel, you're from Switzerland. You guys have an international upbringing, and you bring all of that to that. If you go onto the Vespucci, site, everything. I mean, I'm clicking right now as we speak on your library. I mean, it is super globally expansive. And then if I go to Vespucci Studio as well, you've got Malta, India, you've got, there's stuff in Nepal, etc. So from an overall perspective, to me, one of the reasons that I find myself wanting to do what we're doing at Bang Bang is to share with the world and to make the world seem like a smaller place, because you get audiences around the world consuming stories from around the world. How does Vespucci and what you guys are doing speak to that? And are you guys seeing action all around the world, or are there certain regions which are more active? And how do you see this panning out over the next few years?
Great question. And you're right in that, and this is somewhat obvious, but the future of content, if you will, is borderless, and that's been, I think, evident for quite a while, particularly in the sense that streamers are, whether it's audio streamers or visual streaming platforms, really are sort of interchangeable when it comes to regions and tracking their goals and ambitions. Every big streamer wants to have their own local language content. They want their local audience, as well as sort of broad sweeping international shows. Again, I'm talking about podcasting and audio visual. And for us, that's harmonious with what Vespucci is. And there's a reason why we named it after a global explorer, because we are completely agnostic when it comes to where a story is set. And so, yeah, we have, virtually traveled, although our journalists have always traveled there, to, anywhere from Mauritania, Nicaragua, to Malta, to the far-flung regions of Asia. So we have and for us that's the richness of the company is that wide-reaching network of journalists who bring back these incredible stories from far-flung places that I think audiences are much quicker to adapt to now and are drawn to than before. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does to some extent. Okay, so suppose I'm an investigative journalist in, let's take Indonesia. Okay, I don't know if do you have any stories in Indonesia right now, based in Indonesia?
We do not.
Okay, so that's a good example then.
We're open.
Okay, so suppose I'm an investigative journalist in Indonesia and I have a story that I think has massive global appeal, potential global appeal. How do I work with you?
Well, so either journalist, we welcome and we rejoice when a journalist kind of reaches out to us, and we welcome that, yes. But also we have a team of at the moment 5 development associates that are in both Europe and in the US, and their job is to reach out to journalists that we respect. We respect their writing, their point of views, their interpretations, their careers, and just kind of share more information about who we are and what we're trying to do. And we encourage our development associates to go beyond the obvious, writer, whose byline is the New Yorker and Vanity Fair. And so we do have probably about half of the journalists and the stories that are pitched to us that are coming from places that are not domestic or UK based, which is exciting. If you're a journalist from Indonesia, I think you reach out, and if there's a story that speaks to us, and the story would speak to us for one, all the obvious reasons of what makes a good story, what makes a good narrative, but then also looking at a market like Indonesia, where we don't have any strong footing at all, we would look at if the story could be funded or sold from a different market, i.e., is the story spanning multiple continents or have any relationship with the U.S. or Europe, and if there is, then can we try and find a way to build the project with as a base there. And yeah, that is kind of the way we often think about stories is not just in terms of the strength of the story, but also from a strategic standpoint. Are we in a position as a company that has journalists from everywhere around the world, but really financial backing for projects in specific areas? Are we able to then get the story at a place where it can actually get made? So these are some of the criteria that we're looking at.
Got it. That makes sense. And by definition, this is investigative journalism, right? So by definition, these are stories that are blowing the cover off of something, or shaking shit up, or just making some people uncomfortable. So has this caused you guys to get into any sweaty situations so far? Sorry, guys, we're going to end this episode of Flux Navigators right here. You're going to have to tune in to the next episode to find out if Johnny, Daniel, and the other good people at Vespucci do actually get into sweaty situations and what they do when they do. I'll see you next time.